What's a certificate of occupancy, and why does it matter to a buyer and seller? Coming up. Hi, this is Kai with the Wong team, helping you better understand everything you need to know about New York City real estate. Today, we're shooting at 125 Greenwich, the new development down here in Financial District. If you have any questions or want to learn more about the project, you can find the details in the description below. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Tim Allomong from Allomong Associates. How are you doing today, Tim?
I'm great, Kai. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a New York City real estate attorney. I have an office here in Chelsea. We represent buyers and sellers of real estate all across New York State, mostly here in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. These people are buying and selling co-ops, condos, multifamily homes, single-family homes, and we also do some commercial work.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
So today we wanted to talk about what is CO.
Right. So CO, Certificate of Occupancy, states a building's legal use and/or type of occupancy that's permitted in it. All buildings are going to have a CO unless they were built or constructed prior to when COs were required by New York. That was 1938. So anytime you're purchasing, especially a brownstone out in Brooklyn, you know, a lot of these predate the 1938 statute, so they're not going to have a CO. If you're going to have questions about the type of occupancy or the use that the house is falling under, you want to talk to a real estate attorney.
Yeah, no matter if it's a condo, a co-op, a townhouse, a mixed-use building, or a straight rental building, every type of property has a CO. So it's important to find out what that particular property has and if it's in alignment with what they're marketing as.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about how does CO operate and what information should a buyer generally know about, or if there's ever any issues, how to remedy.
Right, so a certificate of occupancy is going to be issued by the New York Department of Buildings, okay? So the department issues its final certificate when the completed work has been done. It matches the submitted plans that the developer originally sent for work for the new building, or it matches the major alterations to an existing building that has since modified or amended to fit the needs that its new owners are going to have. It issues a letter of completion for minor alterations. For properties, these documents confirm that the work complies with all the applicable laws. The paperwork has been filed with the Department of Buildings. All of the fees that are owed to the department, that they have been paid. Any relevant violations have been cured, resolved, and all necessary approvals for permits, work permits with the city, all the city agencies have all been in line and done satisfactory. So once that is all put together, then the city is going to give you either a temporary certificate of occupancy or they'll give you your final certificate of occupancy.
So why do some get temporary and why do some get final? Is there a reason for one over the other?
So in some circumstances, the department may determine that a property is safe for occupancy, but there's still outstanding requirements or items that the developer will have to take care of before it's approved.
Got it. And as to any property or even new development, they need the CFO or TCO before the buyer can move into the property and they could start closing on it.
Right, and another thing to understand, remember, is that a TCO is temporary. All right, so it expires usually within 90 days, and you can still close with it. Banks will still allow you to close if you're getting financing. It's still safe to occupy the building. Usually it's the final steps of a new development that are remaining to be done before the final CO can be given out.
Yeah, that's very standard for a lot of new developments, just because it's just part of the process, especially when you're talking about buildings that are 100, 200, 300 units.
So if you purchase a co-op, a condo, or any sort of multi or single family home that currently has just a temporary certificate of occupancy, what you want to do is bring in a licensed engineer architect to come in and tell you exactly what you need to do to get the building or the property up to code.
So for example, in the outer boroughs like Brooklyn, there's a lot of townhouses that were built in the 1920s. So they're pre-CO,
Right.
before 1938. What happens with those properties if, for example, they've owned the property all this time, and then now they decide to do a gut renovation, top to bottom, and a buyer walks in and says, I love it, I want to buy it. Are there any concerns or with CO that they should have, and what should they do?
Yes, there are concerns that a buyer would need to address and think about. Obviously, we do have the requirement for a CO coming at 1938 and later, and a lot of the buildings out in Brooklyn were built before then. However, we have to remember that any major alterations done to one of those buildings would require you to have to go out and get a CO. So if you have a home that you're purchasing, it's a gut renovation, and the seller, says that it was constructed before 1938. Well, you still want to see possibly a CO, or at least be able to go on the Department of Buildings website and see that they had filed for permits to do the work, the alterations that they did. So anytime there is a change in use or change in egress or a change in the type of occupancy, then a new CO is going to be required.
Let's talk a little bit about, you're saying major renovation. So what does that mean? Are we talking about moving the kitchen, moving the bathroom? And in the case where they don't move those items, it's just really more cosmetic, they're ripping out everything where they are and putting brand new things right back there.
Right.
Do they still require getting a new CO for those?
Major alterations are always going to trigger the need to do something like this. But if you have minor alterations, the Department of Buildings can issue a letter of completion. These documents, again, they confirm that the work was done in compliance with the code. If you're moving anything electrical, if you're moving walls, pipes, then obviously that's going to raise the necessity to do everything properly. Anytime you're doing a renovation to your property, you're going to talk to an engineer and or an architect. That is who is going to tell you whether or not the type of renovation that you're doing is going to rise to the level that you need a CO amendment or modification. But if it's just a minor alteration, it's generally acceptable to file a permit with the city, and then once the work has been done, then inspectors come out to see, and they issue a letter of completion just to certify that the work has been done satisfactory. I'll give you a personal experience of mine.
Okay.
Recently, we had a deal go in Brooklyn, Flatbush, and it was a gut renovated house that was built prior to 1938, and we noticed that the use and the alterations were major. So the first thing I do as a real estate attorney is I check the Department of Buildings website to see what permits they filed to do all of these renovations. Unfortunately, there were no permits.
Oh no.
So in that situation, you have a problem with, possibly the seller's doing some work that weren't up to code. For example, if there's a chimney or there's a gas meter or any kind of electrical stuff, by not making sure that those were up to code, a whole host of issues come up. First is safety. Anything that's electrical, or chimney related, heating related, you want to make sure that it was done in a way that is not going to present a fire hazard. Anytime you don't see permits that were filed for a new renovation, you want to kind of be suspicious. In this situation, the utility company that normally supplies gas to the area came in to put a new gas meter in. They got there, they looked around and saw all of this renovation, and they saw that there also were no permits filed for the property. And in that situation, they actually refused to put the gas meter in until it was properly permitted.
So what do you do at that point?
Well, fortunately, we were still in the pre-contract negotiation stages.
Okay.
So, we signed a contract, but there were a couple of contingencies in there to require the seller to get the building up to code, so that way it was livable. My clients had 2 baby girls, so we wanted to make sure that it was safe.
Well, definitely. I personally understand. I have 2 little ones myself.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's really important because you did your homework beforehand, before going to contract, to make sure the client's protected. And that's actually a very important point of this whole conversation about CO and TCO. For you as the potential buyer or seller to be aware of what to look out for to make sure whether your purchase, if you're a buyer or your investment as a seller, are protected under any circumstance. So thank you so much, Tim, for sharing this information. We really appreciate it. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. On this channel, we share with you buying, selling tips, market updates, and neighborhood guides. So if you have any questions from today's video, let us know in the comments below, and we'll be happy to answer them in a future video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. Bye.